Hey, welcome to the first devlog for a new game I'm working on that I'm currently calling Project TRS. Demo is live on itch.io, so if you just want to play the game and don't care about the process or the devlog, you can find the link in the description. Project TRS is a mix between a Zelda-style action RPG and a tower defense. You control a character that can run around, attack enemies, roll, pretty much all the action RPG hallmarks of a character controller, except you can also build stuff to help in your fight against waves of enemies. You have a sword for killing enemies and a hammer for constructing and repairing buildings. There are multiple kinds of buildings that do different things. There are the basic defense towers, which operate like a standard tower defense tower. They shoot whatever enemies are within range automatically. Then there are a bunch of buildings that buff you in certain ways. For example, the blacksmith increases the attack power of your sword, and the healing well heals you at the start of each wave. The TRS in the name stands for Tower Defense, RPG, and Sim. Don't worry about the sim part, that comes later. For now, we're just working on the tower defense and RPG part of the game. If you watched my last devlog on canceling my old game project, you'll have seen a mock-up for the game, which was actually the first thing I did. Also, if you watched that video, you might remember that I said the project would be done at the end of September, and since it's currently the middle of November, you might be tempted to call me a liar, and I can't really blame you. Development officially started on August 25th, and I had made myself a nice little plan that had me finishing well before the end of September, leaving plenty of time for polish, but as we'll see, all does not go according to plan. Week 1 was pretty productive. I got most of the annoying stuff out of the way, like setting up the tile map in Godot and getting the player controller working. I wanted to try to limit the unknowns in this project, so I also messed around with lighting in the first week just to make sure that it was simple and that it could be done. I also got the hitbox and hurtbox system working in a very bare bones combat with the skeletons. I was really trying to speed through the first couple of milestones because I knew that the next one was going to be a huge pain. By the way, I'll have links for all the assets I'm using in the description. Next, I wanted to tackle pathfinding for the skeleton. I've done A-star pathfinding before, and Godot even has a few nodes to help out with this, but I thought that working with Godot's built-in navigation server would be easier since I wouldn't have to manage the grid or worry about creating the A-star nodes myself. I thought wrong. Pathfinding definitely took up more time than it should have. I did eventually figure it out, but my system is pretty clunky and bad. The biggest trouble I had was that I couldn't figure out a decent way to update the navigation polygons on the fly. From what I've heard, the 4.2 version of Godot actually has a fix for this, but I haven't looked at it yet. What I ended up doing was manually drawing tiles that had navigation data on them in the places where the skeletons can navigate, and then when a building is built, I delete the tiles beneath the building. This is a really dumb way to do this and also causes a ton of headaches in other part of the code, so this is something I really want to refactor. Another fun tidbit is that since the navigation server is asynchronous, and my state machine is not, it was causing a lot of bugs, I considered refactoring my state machine to account for the async of the navigation server, but instead I just manually wait a physics frame before switching to the pathfinding state to ensure that the navigation server has synchronized before I access it. Once I got pathfinding somewhat working, I still had to manage the enemy waves. The way that I did this was by making a class called Skeleton Commander that basically gives orders to the skeletons. The skeletons themselves don't have access to any building data, and in general are pretty dumb. The Skeleton Commander class is in charge of telling them where to pathfind to and when to spawn. At the beginning of a wave, the Skeleton Commander receives the length of that wave, then divides it by the amount of skeletons they want to spawn, so it can spawn them at even intervals. When it spawns a skeleton, it looks to see which buildings have open spots. Open spots are just spots that a skeleton can pathfind to that surround the building that another skeleton isn't going to already. It checks for open spots around the town hall first, and if those are all full, it picks a random building. Once it has an open spot, it assigns a skeleton to it and tells that skeleton to pathfind to that open spot. If the skeleton dies, the spot is freed. This isn't really the best system, but it's fine for now. This is another thing I'll probably end up refactoring. Skeleton finite state machine is really buggy and the pathfinding is weird, but I'm calling it finished. At this point, I was officially behind schedule, but is it really a game dev project if you aren't behind schedule at some point? The next thing on the docket was the build system and the defense towers. This actually went fairly smooth. I had to account for my weird pathfinding with the tile map stuff, but overall the build system works pretty well. I have a base building that I inherit from every time I need to make a new one, and then I make a data container resource that contains the runtime building node and other data about the building, including the collision shape. The collision shape is used by the building placer node to tell if the building is overlapping with anything before the actual node is instantiated. The buildings also have an unlocked property and an unlock at property, which ties into the town progression system, but I'll talk about that in a bit because town stats came later. The data containers for each building are passed to the game manager node via an exported variable, and the game manager handles giving all of the available buildings to the build system UI and everything else that needs it. This is called the mediator pattern, and it's what really smart people do. This is when I implemented the town stats, as well as the day-night system. Again, I used the mediator pattern here because, again, I'm a smart boy. Both of these things were actually really simple to implement. For the town stats, I just needed to update a variable when a building is built saying that the town is now a new level, since certain buildings upgrade the town to the next level. I implemented an abstract method called _build. The underscore indicates that it's abstract, which runs when a building is built. If you don't know, an abstract method is a concept where a parent class declares an empty method for the express purpose of the child overriding it with their own functionality. The main point is to ensure that every object of that type has the method, so you can just run structure._build and guarantee that the object you're calling it on has the method. This isn't really a thing in GDScript since GDScript doesn't use interfaces, but the concept is a useful one and you can implement it just by declaring the function in the parent class and running pass in the body. Then the child node can overwrite the function with its own functionality. I know I'm using the terms method and function kind of interchangeably, and I'm not going to go into too much depth on object-oriented programming and functional programming because it's a bit beyond the scope of this video, but the general idea is that they're pretty much the same thing, except methods are only inside of a class declaration and can't be called without an object being instantiated, and functions can run whenever they want. In general, languages don't mix these concepts. C# has methods, GDScript has functions. Functions are better, the rest isn't important. If you want, I can do an absurdly deep dive on this concept and how it relates to the Godot buzzword of composition, so leave me a comment if you're interested. I need very little incentive to rant and ramble about programming concepts as it inflates my ego and makes me feel smart. By the way, you don't have to do this. Another way to get this exact functionality is to run the function has with the function name as a parameter, and it'll only run on nodes with that function. Look up duck typing if you're curious about that. Okay, sorry, last tangent. Anyway, I created these abstract function method machinations that run whenever the building is built and at the start of every turn. Now that I had the abstract function for when a building was built, I could simply emit a signal that updates that variable that says what level the town is when the buildings are built that actually level up the town. In addition, I can now do things like have the healing well heal you on every wave because there's a function that runs on every building when the wave starts. I mentioned earlier that buildings have an unlocked at property. This is just a number corresponding to the level of the town that the building's unlocked at, and the building manager will just check that town variable I mentioned earlier and see if the building's unlocked. The day-night cycle was super simple. I basically just have a timer that runs, and on finish I tween the canvas modulate node to simulate nighttime, turn on the lights, change the music, increment the wave. Fairly standard stuff. I already talked about how the skeleton commander uses the wave timer to spawn skeletons at equal intervals. This is the timer that the skeleton commander is using. If you're keeping track, you'll notice that this is the final week, and I'm doing pretty well. At this point, pretty much the only tasks remaining were to add sound and music, add some menus, add the rest of the content like levels and buildings, and slap it on an itch.io page. No way I could mess this up, right? Wrong. For my day job, I work at a startup, and the fun thing about startups is the exciting, chaotic environment, and the not fun thing about startups is the exciting, chaotic environment. This week, work got absolutely crazy, and I had no time for game dev. That's fine, you think to yourself. Just finish the next week, and you're only a week late on your deadline. Wrong again. I was leaving for New York on Saturday, and I was going to be there for a full week. So week 5, I did pretty much nothing for the game. I was in the Big Apple, baby. I was a regular Mad Men guy at swanky rooftop bars and stuffing my face with more Korean barbecue than one man should reasonably eat. It was a really amazing trip, and I got to see some friends I hadn't seen in months, plus meet a friend I'd only met online. Needless to say, I did not get anything done for the game this week. The fun thing about taking a week off is that you don't have to work for a week. The unfun thing about taking a week off is that you have a week's worth of work to do when you get back. I'm just gonna cut to the chase. I didn't do shit for the rest of October. Then, on October 29th, almost a full month late, I committed the most glorious commit to GitHub. Then, an hour or so later, the second most glorious commit ever. That weekend, I had buckled down and finished up the remaining things to make the game a game. I added sound, music, menus, and finished up the content. The demo was done. I got it up on an itch.io page and sent it to some friends and family, and the reception was actually really positive, which was super exciting. There was still a ton of work to do, but overall people seemed to like it. Now, you may be wondering why this video is coming out now instead of on October 29th. Well, that's because I'm very bad at video editing. I also had a rock climbing competition that I was preparing for that week and recovering from the following week. But we're here now and the demo is live on itch. The link is in the description, so please play it, break it, let me know what you like, what you don't like, what you don't get. You can either leave a comment on this video or on the itch.io page. I'll be reading all of them. I took a break off of development for a little bit, but I'm gonna be diving back in with bug fixes and some new functionality and content. I'm hoping to get the demo in a good place over the next couple weeks. I do have plans for the future, but I'll talk about those in another video. Well, that's it for this one. I know I say this every video, but I'm genuinely going to try to get faster at making these devlogs so there's not months in between each of them. Regardless, thank you so much for watching and thank you for all the comments. It's kind of amazing how nice and supportive everyone has been, so please keep it coming. That validation just really fuels me. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.